Hello Dragonfly Swarm! It's finally time to talk about Rappa, and I was able to test her early on the Creator Experience server so that I could put together some information and first impressions about this character. This video will be a brief guide on how to play her, what her strengths are, and what my honest first impressions are before I upload a complete Rappa guide a little later this week. This was all recorded and tested on the Creator Experience server, so although it's unlikely to happen, the content you see is subject to change. But with that out of the way, let's get right into talking about this 5-star Imaginary Erudition skydiving street ninja! So, Rappa is the newest addition to the Super Break DPS roster, and as such, her entire playstyle revolves around easily breaking through toughness bars so she can start dishing out massively enhanced break damage with teammates like Harmony MC. In that way, she's not unlike Firefly, but Rappa's kit, at a baseline, focuses far more on massive AoE DPS. She has several tools at her disposal to help herself do this, namely her enhanced basic attack, which allows her to perform a 3-hit combo, where the first 2 hits strike in a blast, and the final hit strikes all enemies on the field for equal damage, allowing her to dish out some seriously insane AoE super break damage. Note that these attacks will reduce enemy toughness regardless of whether or not they are imaginary weak. To gain access to her enhanced basic attacks, Rappa must cast her ultimate, which will give her an extra turn, enhance her weakness break efficiency and her break effect, and then it gives her 3 charges of the enhanced basic to use. The really cool thing to note is that the final strike in her 3-hit enhanced basic combo can be massively buffed thanks to her talent, which essentially states that anytime an enemy's weakness is broken, regardless of whether Rappa breaks it or her teammates, Rappa will gain a charge point up to 10 maximum. Each charge point she holds will add more break and toughness damage to the modifiers of the final hit in her next enhanced basic attack, turning it into what is essentially just an absurd AoE super break nuke. Rappa's skill is a simple AoE imaginary attack, and her trace passives focus solely on raising her total damage ceiling. A2 will grant her another instance of super break on her enhanced basic, A4 will help her stack more charge points and energy when breaking elite or boss enemies, which is really nice. Then A6 gives her an incentive to build attack. It basically allows her to increase the amount of break damage weakness broken enemies take by up to 10% if her attack reaches 3200, which is a nice boost to her total team DPS. And finally, of course, Rappa's technique is a great way to open a battle with some good toughness damage for preemptive charge points, and it'll give her some energy at the start of combat, which helps to speed up her ramp up time. So knowing basically what she does, where does Rappa excel currently? I've had a lot of time to test her, and it should be a little surprise since she's an erudition unit, but her current strengths are very apparent in AoE combat like Pure Fiction. But with the right enemy lineups, she even feels significant in MOC, and can hold her own in Epoch Shadow with higher investment. Unlike Firefly, Rappa does not have the ability to implant weakness on enemies, so she does generally need to pay attention to the enemies she's up against, especially in combat with fewer than 3 enemies on the field. Don't take this the wrong way though, she's still exceptionally strong in certain areas, and she can to some extent brute force her way through content with universal toughness damage she'll deal with her enhanced basics. Where someone like Firefly is something like a jack of all trades, E0 Rappa is just a little more specialized and tailored toward AoE combat, and that's quite apparent when you face her against imaginary weak enemies in AoE, wherein she will absolutely decimate them with the same power that you only see from high-end DPS units. On top of this, she's quite easy to build, and although she doesn't have very many light cone options currently, all the ones she does have perform well enough to keep her relevant where she's needed, which is really nice whether you're a free-to-play, low spender, or whale. Rappa at E0 will, in my educated opinion, be a top-tier unit in Pure Fiction for her emphasis on speed, extra turns, massive AoE damage, and consistent uptime. It's also worth noting that one of her weaknesses, which I'll discuss in a moment, is almost completely remedied by the simple nature of Pure Fiction, so let's talk about that. Rappa certainly does have strengths, but like all characters to some extent, she also has weaknesses. The most notable weakness she'll have in 2.6 is the fact that much of her absurd damage potential is locked behind her team's ability to regularly break enemies, and obviously toughness bars don't just magically mend themselves fast enough to allow Rappa to constantly max out her 10 charge points, but even further than that, she inflicts imaginary break, which delays the enemy's ability to recover their toughness bars. Because of this, E0 Rappa can become difficult to capitalize on in combat with tankier and or fewer enemies, but becomes significantly stronger in combat where she can constantly wipe enemy waves and bring forth new enemies with new toughness bars to farm off of. To add to this discussion though, Rappa's current best break support, Ruan Mei, also has a mechanic that significantly delays enemy weakness recovery, which in some scenarios can even further exaggerate her weakness outside of places like Pure Fiction, because without the ability to constantly farm weakness break, her bread and butter enhanced attacks will feel less significant. But there's a really exciting prospect about this, and it all kind of boils down to the phrase that has applied to many other top tier DPS characters in the past: future content will make her much stronger. Hoyoverse is no stranger to releasing a DPS character several months before they become significant via via the help of new supports or new mechanics. Take for example characters with very distinct conditions to unleash their DPS, like Acheron, who needs consistent debuff applications to even cast her ultimate, or Fei Xiao, who needs constant attacks to cast her ultimate. Mechanics like these, without proper teammates to support them, would significantly hold Acheron and Fei Xiao back, and they would not be top tier DPS characters if they didn't have the teammates to supplement their distinct mechanics. And for someone with such a distinct mechanic as Rappa, I personally believe it's entirely likely she'll be complemented with either new gear, new mechanics, or new teammates in the near future that will wildly enhance her ability to capitalize on her charge points mechanic. It would be as simple as releasing a character who can forcibly recover enemy toughness bars or apply exo weakness on enemies, or perhaps adding gear that does something similar. It would take that one singular addition and suddenly Rappa would be a top tier unit not only in pure fiction, which she already is in my opinion, but also likely in MOC, and a strong unit in APOC Shadow as well. Because realistically, one of the only things keeping her confined in her role as a traditional Erudition DPS right now is the fact that she does not have a teammate to supplement that distinct part of her kit, and therefore needs hordes of enemies to effectively farm and stack her charge points for super break nukes. If you add in a forced exo toughness mechanic, which effectively doubles the rate at which she stacks charge points, boom! That is no longer an Erudition character, that is an Aeon. All of that to say, Rappa has plenty of strengths and she does have her weaknesses, but I personally think she's already a very respectable unit as she is, and there's a good chance she'll see some significant enhancements to her value in the near future. But now that we've gone over how she works and where she works best, I want to briefly discuss her teams, and I'll go in a lot more detail in the full guide, of course. I just felt it was worth addressing some of your options so you can prepare for her release. You need to know first and foremost, Rappa's viable teams are essentially the same as all other Super Break DPS units, and she needs to stick to this archetype in order to perform consistently well. As a Super Break DPS, Rappa absolutely needs Harmony Trailblazer, and there's almost no way around that. But luckily for you, Harmony Trailblazer is a completely free character and is really strong. Plus, this Super Break meta keeps getting fleshed out, so you might as well just build them and keep them in your back pocket. These two characters will make up the core of the team for Rappa, and from here, you have some options for your third teammate. You'll want to fill this spot with some sort of buffer or debuffer support, and obviously your best pick in 2.6 is Ruan Mei. She does have the anti-synergy that I discussed with Rappa's weaknesses, but everything else she provides to Rappa is significant, and in pure fiction, her anti-synergy will hardly matter anyway, so you'll essentially just be reaping all the benefits of Ruan Mei with no drawbacks. Speed, weakness break efficiency, defense ignore, it's Super Break paradise. But if you don't have Ruan Mei, I've also tested Asta and Pela as replacements, and they're both still very respectable options for your Rappa. Asta focuses on providing more speed to the Street Ninja, so you'll generally see less big damage per screenshot, but you'll have more consistent damage output overall. Pela, on the other hand, is great for SP economy and provides great defense shred, which will help keep Rappa's damage real high so you can screenshot it and send it to your cat. Silver Wolf can work here too, and technically so can other buffers like Sparkle and Branya, but they're a lot more situational, and if I'm honest, they kind of just overcomplicate things for Rappa. In your fourth spot, you'll simply need to round out your team with a sustain unit. Anybody can technically work as long as they're good at keeping your team alive, but obviously Gallagher and Lingsha will be your premier choices since they're designed to work best in break teams. I'll discuss these two characters in a lot more detail in the full Rappa guide, but for now, what you need to know is that Lingsha is notably more effective in most scenarios for Rappa teams, but Gallagher is still a very comfortable and respectable choice. Your teams overall will be focused on constantly breaking enemies to farm Rappa's charge points and buffing her damage with super break modifiers, break damage increases, and defense shreds so that she can dish out her flashy enhanced basic attack nukes turn after turn. One point I wanted to discuss in particular before we wrap up is investment potential on Rappa. She has quite good early Eidolons that'll provide considerable boosts not only to her damage, but also to her viability outside of pure fiction. E1 simply boosts her damage and helps her maintain ultimate uptime, but it's a notable total DPS increase. More significantly though, E2 provides quite a bit more toughness reduction to the targeted enemies in Rappa's first two attacks of the 3-hit enhanced combo, but what does that mean? Well, firstly, it means a huge boost to her super break modifier with these instances of damage, but it also, funny enough, makes her more efficient at handling weakness breaks, so she'll enjoy some increased viability in otherwise unfavorable combat scenarios, like when she's against fewer enemies, or enemies that don't have imaginary weakness. TLDR, she becomes more versatile. Very nice constellation if you were considering it. Her signature light cone is also worth discussing, and I'll discuss it more in the full guide obviously, but what you need to know right now is that it is a significant boost in power, and I would generally say it's stronger than her E1 if you had to decide between one or the other, but it's also worth noting that at high superimposition, the 4-star Charmony light cone performs pretty good on her, so you could argue against her signature if you would prefer trying to reach for her increased versatility with E2. Obviously, please make these considerations responsibly and do your research based on what resources you have on your account account before making any decisions in this regard. But okay, I want to round out this video with an honest review and first impressions of my experience with playing Rappa, so let's discuss. E0 Rappa is genuinely a very fun character to play in my opinion. She adds some great interactions to the game with her ultimate and enhanced basic attacks, and despite being somewhat soft-locked out of her maximum charge point potential currently, she feels very strong when necessary conditions are met. As long as she can frequently feed off of enemy weakness breaks, her damage is significant regardless of what content you bring her in. It's just a matter of getting her those charge points consistently. The cool thing too is that she doesn't even have to be the one to break enemies in order to gain charge points, so she's much more of a team player than other similarly powerful DPS characters, and in a way that kinda guarantees her future-proof potential, not unlike how characters such as Acheron and Fei Xiao are future-proofed by their exceptionally weird mechanics. As a sort of review, I'd like to say that as of 2.6, E0 Rappa feels like a top-tier unit in pure fiction, and she can be strong even in other high-end content so long as she's up against imaginary weakness and or enemies that her team can constantly farm weakness breaks on. She does occasionally suffer from her own inability to fully capitalize on her talent, which provides a key aspect of her damage output, and if you don't invest heavily in her, she won't be able to single-handedly brute force her way through content against non-imaginary weakness enemies, but she still can rely on her teammates to remedy some of that for her. So overall, if you're looking for a new DPS character to help you with endgame content, Rappa might be a great choice for you, especially if you don't mind dipping into the Super Break archetype and specializing mostly in pure fiction for right now. She is at the end of the day a DPS character, so if you already have plenty of those, you might feel more inclined to save for support characters, as is the nature of most Hoyoverse games, but ironically, Rappa doesn't really require a significant amount of effort to come online and bring value to the table. Any further considerations are yours alone to make though, of course, and all I can do is give you the full Rappa guide in a few days to help you make the most of her immense potential if you did decide to bring her home. Oh, important for transparency. For the majority of gameplay in this video, I ran my Rappa with a 4-piece cavalry set since it's her strongest and most consistent set overall. I also ran her with the Talia planar since it's also her most consistent planar, and my main stats were attack percent body, speed boots, attack percent sphere, and a break effect rope. My substats focused on reaching important stat goals like getting her to a speed break point past 145 for the Talia set, as well as maximizing her A6 passive by getting her to 3200 attack, and then putting all the rest of my stats into break effect, because Rappa, you can never have too much break effect on Rappa. The light cone I used for the majority of this footage was after the Charmony fall at S5, but funny enough, it's already one of her best light cones even at S1. I'll spend a lot more time discussing all your build options for her in the full guide, but just for transparency, that's what we were working with this footage. Thank you for watching, and if this video helped you, please subscribe so you can stay tuned for the full Rappa guide coming later this week!